Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Nicki Bass on the show. Good afternoon to you, Nicki.
Hi, good afternoon, Julia. It's lovely to be here.
Good to have you. You are a business psychologist, you're a TEDx speaker, you're owner of Resilience at Work, about helping teams and individuals to build resilience through adventure. And we'll be exploring that later. And you've got a background of spending over 17 years as a learning development officer in the British Army. So that's good. So we will be exploring about everyday adventures and resilience. Resilience, one of my favourite topics. So looking forward to this. But before we get into that, Nicki, I'd like to know, what do you love about what you do?
Oh my goodness, it's such a big question that, and I think there's so many things I love about what I do. I think the main one is the connection with people and seeing the change, particularly I think when I'm doing the sort of the experiential and the adventurous side of things, you're seeing the change happen in that moment, and that's amazing. And yeah, when I'm doing that side of things, obviously the being outdoors, being in nature, I love too. So there's a whole, I think what I do now brings in a whole sort of different, or a whole collection of different things about me together in one place. And yeah, that puts me in a place where I feel I can support other people best as well.
And when did you realise that is what you love about what you do and all those things coming together? When was that moment?
I think so. I remember I've run sort of individual workshops as well as sort of working with corporates and organisations. I've run workshops for individuals and for particularly women, sort of reintroducing them back into adventure, reconnection with their adventurous self. And it was one of the first things I did after leaving the army. I ran a retreat down to, or a workshop, because retreat makes it feel like it's really relaxing, and it completely wasn't. But we went down to North Devon and sort of took a group of women coast steering, which is sort of jumping off rocks, and surfing for the weekend. And I just remember that sort of moment of being on the beach, or being out in the water with them, and just the sheer joy and whooping, and people were also a little bit scared, but just people having so much fun. And but also then being able to reconnect them with that bit back when we got inside, and sort of running alongside the coaching element too, and just going, what was it, what is the bit that you've been missing, what was the bit that's really stuck with you about this? And yeah, I think it was just standing there on the beach though, and just thinking, gosh, I get to do this for a living, how lucky am I, mainly.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. I love it when people find their, I call it purpose, mission, whatever you want to call it, and it really resonates, and it doesn't feel like work, because you so enjoy it, and seeing people and helping people discover things and do great things like that. We're going to be exploring a little bit about everyday adventures and resilience, and I'd like to ask, how would you define resilience? Because I think it's a definition that can be so subjectively interpreted, and I just want to understand from your perspective how you define it. I've got a definition in my head, and that sort of perhaps changes a little bit now and again, but I'd just like to get your understanding of what resilience is.
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, it's one of these terms that's just sort of bandied about and taken to mean everything from sort of like grit and perseverance, and encompassing all sorts. And I think it can be used quite punitively as well, in terms of, well, you're not resilient enough, and we need to build your resilience so that you can take on more stuff, which I tend to sort of push back quite heavily against. I think for me, resilience is, when it comes to it, it's that little voice in your head that says it'll be okay. So it's being able to hang on to that little voice in some really tough and challenging times, and that can be in work, in relationships, in in your life away from work. It covers all sorts of areas, but it's this feeling that when things get really difficult or challenging, and like really hard life events, that although it might feel like your world is collapsing around you, at your sort of core, you've got this sense that I've got the resources, I've got the support, I've got a way of finding my way out of this somehow, and being able to not be flawed by it. I tend to resist the sort of bouncing back definition, if I'm honest, because I feel that implies that you're sort of going back to where you were before, and we never, we never go through something without changing as a result of it. And I also think we're not necessarily going to thrive in the traditional sense always of going, well, I'm so glad that thing happened to me, because people go through some very difficult,
Mm.
often incredibly painful life events. But I think it is that sense that at some level that I'm being held, and I might be being held internally, but I also need to be held externally to be able to
Mm.
move forward and progress. So I guess that's what it is for me.
I really like that definition, and I agree with you that sort of bouncing back can be so sort of glib and so sort of, if you're not all bouncy, optimistic, positive, then you haven't got it. And I think often people forget. For me, the piece of resilience is that learning piece.
Yeah.
When you, whatever you term it, fall down, get knocked, whatever, however you are stopped or challenged, however it might be, is how you learn in that point, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's not just about getting back up again, and if that's your sort of view, because that to me is just grit, and
Yeah.
just seems a physical thing, and only some people have that. But actually, it's that before you get back up, before you navigate a challenge, is what have you just learned from that moment? That's to me the key piece, is the learning piece, and I think we forget that, and that takes time and that takes reflection as well. So yeah, so we're linking this in with this sort of everyday adventures, because I know you are an adventurous spirit about you. You've been to the British Army, and you've done various things. And I'd just like to just go back to how you got to a place where you started to bring in this everyday piece. What is everyday adventures for you, and how did that sort of start for you? Where did all that come from, and why is that important to have everyday adventures to sort of build this resilience?
Yeah, so it came from a really personal place, actually, of just feeling a bit stuck myself, and of always, and I mean, there's also scales of adventures. I'm not like someone who's gone off and done some huge, massive adventure that, for a year or 2 years, or done expeditions and that side of things. But I've always, I guess, part of my identity for me has always been attached to sort of, whether it's adventurous sports, I love sort of mountain sports, snowboarding and surfing and that side of things, or that sort of adventurous idea of, wanting to explore new places or try new things, and having new possibilities the whole time. So I think that's always been how I've seen myself. And then when I had kids, bless them, love them dearly. But I think, as so many people experience, I felt, and I don't think I felt it as an immediate thing, but I think over a period of time sort of felt as if my world had contracted, and that was sort of experiencing this just sort of a frustration of, those things are no longer an option to me. Not everything, I still going on holiday and doing lovely things with them, and having also, really lucky in that sense. But just, I suppose, that freedom and that spontaneity had gone. Everything had to be planned, and I was sort of, I guess, designing things to fit everybody else. And I suppose it just felt that I don't know if I'd lost that part of me, but that it just felt a bit disconnected. And then I think, there were a couple of moments that really changed that, and one of them was actually being out walking with my kids one day, and they was like, I was dragging them along for a walk, and they're being really annoying, and we were being late, and they were dawdling, and I was cross, and all the usual. And it was quite muddy, and typical sort of UK walk, probably in sort of October. And I just remember them. So one of them, I think it was my daughter, so when mum, come and look at this. This is, I don't remember what she was saying, what she wanted me to look at, but I just remember that sort of feeling of, honestly, she's really excited about something. Like, this sort of realization hit me that she was on an adventure, that she was living in the moment, and that the thing that I was looking for, that she was experiencing. And I just sort of, I guess it just started to make me question, hold on a second, why do I think an adventure has to be out there, wherever there is? Could it not be, is there not space for an adventure sort of much closer to home, or right where I am? Why is that place more exciting or exotic or whatever it is than stepping outside my front door? And I suppose that started me in a sort of process of looking, and I realized that part of that was about mindset, that it was about my expectation of what an adventure was.
And why
Yeah.
is adventure important in the context of, well, as for you, obviously you've come from that background,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
why did it matter, and why should it matter to us as individuals, whether you do polar expeditions
Yeah.
or whatever else you do in the classroom if you're a teacher?
So I mean, I could go on about this for hours, to be honest. There's so many reasons, but I think what adventure does for us, or feeling that adventure is accessible, is that it opens up possibility. It opens up possibility of growth, of change, of learning something new. Going back to your point about resilience being partly about that learning, that actually we never stop learning, that that it grounds us in the present as well. Because when you're on an adventure, whether it's a mini adventure or a huge adventure, it's very difficult to think about anything else in that moment. So you're sort of very present and engaged with where you are. But I think it's the process of taking ourselves outside of our comfort zone, which is part of that learning, which naturally I think contracts as we get older, because we become experts in our field, we become comfortable, we tend to build on our expertise rather than our being rubbish at something. Quite frankly, we tend to go, all right, well, that's not my area, this is my area, this is what I'm going to grow. But I think the more, and I mean, there's evidence as well that that the more we take time outside of our comfort zone in multiple small ways, the more we become comfortable with being in that space of not knowing, of uncertainty, of just not being an expert. And I think that enables us to be able to hand over a form of control. We spend so much of our lives trying to control everything. And feeling that when we're out of control can feel incredibly scary. But in a way, and particularly for someone who really likes being in control, when we get more and more practiced and being outside that comfort zone, not being certain, not being sure, then we become able to tolerate it better. And then I think that has implications for every area of our life. Sit with that lack of knowing much more easily, expand our comfort zones further so we grow and learn more. But also, I think that then really supports our resilience, because so much about having to be or being resilient is about coping with the unknown and that uncertainty and being able to sit in that place.
So, I mean, there's a lot of talk about getting outside your comfort zone, and it can be taught. And you're not saying glibly, I know I like to explore a bit, and it can be a bit,
Yeah.
oh, you need to get outside your comfort zone. And it's a very sort of one-liner, isn't it? And
yeah.
and I've talked to people and they go, well, what does that really mean? And how does that work? And why does it work? Why does it? So just break that down. What is it? And give an example, perhaps from your perspective, from when you had children, you had to sort of start exploring different ways. But also, why does that? What happens psychologically? What's going on in our brains that's helping us to then build that resilience? What are the sort of factors that are at play here?
Yeah, so I like to characterize it in a sort of a physical sensation. So I think it's what starts happening to you when you're no longer that comfortable. Is it sort of that icky, sicky feeling in your stomach that's a bit like, I'm going to find a reason why I'm not going to do that thing. That for me is always a sign that I'm like, yeah, I'm just starting to make excuses in my head about why I don't really want to do that. I'm like, okay, so it's about, sometimes it's, and normally what we do is we walk away from it then and go, right, well, that's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But in a way, it's that sort of leaning into that feeling of feeling uncomfortable. It can be, it's not necessarily just physically being uncomfortable. It might be socially feeling uncomfortable. So an example would be, public speaking, if it's something, and I think for everyone, regardless of whether we're sort of expert public speakers, there's always that bit at the start, which is like, I can't remember what I'm going to say. I remember this feeling before I did the TED talk. I was just like, geez, I just need to go now because I'm about to humiliate myself totally. That.
So taking that, sorry. So taking
Yeah.
that. So I just, because I think it's sometimes helpful when people are listening how you break down, because people have those. whether it's a big client negotiation, it could be
Yes.
a presentation, could be a speech, whatever it may be. And you get those feelings, we all get those feelings where we think, and the
Mm.
body's going, run away, run
Fight, flight,
away.
freeze, yeah, get
So
out of
what
here. Or
so what can we do to push through without just saying just push through? What do you do? What is there any sort of things that you helps you to sort of, I don't know, hacks, what do you want to call it, that will help you push through to get over that uncomfortableness?
yeah, so I mean, there's multiple things. I think partly it depends on what it is, the thing. But so, for example, with that, I think one, it's recognizing that this is a normal feeling.
Mm,
I think that's a good start. Just being conscious of it and going, okay, well, it would be totally normal for me to feel like this at this point. There's nothing. It's not about me. This isn't about me. And the reality, we can start thinking, because I feel like this, that means it's real. That actually I am going to mess up, or this isn't going to go well. All these sort of things come into our head. So it's, okay, so this is normal. I'm going to feel like this. Um, for me, what really helps is, so for example, with the TED Talk, I find it helpful to get some space. For other people, it might be, that they want to distract and get into conversation with someone else. I'm like, actually, I just wanted to go for a walk and sort of clear my head a bit. What also helps is, what are the strategies that are going to enable you to feel you can do the thing? So going back to, what do I have? Well, I know I've rehearsed this. Can I read through my script one more time? Or, what tools do I have there that enable me to think, well, at least I've got enough hooks. And I think this is the really important thing with a comfort zone. It's a sort of a sweet spot almost between feeling comfortable and feeling terrified. What you don't want to do is go into that panic zone where you just can't think, and you feel like your
mm,
brain's been taken over. And that's why I always advocate doing sort of these adventures in steps. Like, it's what's
mm,
the smallest possible thing you could do to give you that feeling without also putting you into terror, because that's not helpful either. So breathing, obviously, there's all the techniques out there that sort of help to just sort of calm us, get us back
mm,
into a place where we can think and make rational decisions. And yeah, breathing definitely helps for me. Um, Another thing that I find really powerful when I'm going into, like, if I'm making the decision to do something, is I visualize the end result. Why am I doing this? Knowing the reason I'm doing this, because that
mm,
allows you to hold on to it through the discomfort. So if I think, this is I've, for example, with the talk, I've got something to share with a client negotiation. There's something that you're wanting to, a reason you're wanting to do this, a reason you're there, and that sense of purpose can be really powerful in just
mm,
helping you to sort of not necessarily push through, but just to sit alongside that discomfort. And I think it's, I suppose, there's that lovely analogy. I don't know, I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert or Brené Brown, I'm not sure, who talked about sort of fear being, you know, being in the back seat. You can stay in the car with me, you can sit in the back seat, but don't try and take the steering wheel.
mm.
And I think
That's a great analogy,
I
isn't it?
love it. I
Yeah, that's
just
good.
love it because it's so visual, and it's like, actually, I'm not going to get rid of that feeling. That feeling's actually
Yeah,
pretty helpful because it's keeping me safe. We need it. But
yeah,
if I broadly know that what I'm doing is not dangerous, is not going to, not putting me in danger, not doing something so extended out, then actually I can afford to let you just sit in the back
mm.
seat, and but I'm still making those decisions. And I think that's, having that picture in your head can be really helpful too.
Yeah, it is, and I like the way you aligning to your purpose, the why, that what got me here, and
Mm,
why am I doing this in the first place? Whatever I am doing,
yeah,
there must have been a reason behind it, and that can be really. And if it's linked to a bigger purpose, then it becomes a bit more, a bit of a force behind this. Actually, that there's something meaningful out of
yeah,
this, and it's aligned, so that it resonates, and it becomes then a positive self-talk going on. I also find, for me, just sometimes, just in the moment of that, I say fear, it's not so much fear, but that sense of what am I doing, is okay, what's the wisdom in this right now? What is it
mm,
telling me? Is it
yeah,
telling me to just drink some water, so I'm just about to speak, or is it just telling me to just take a breath and just relax? There's some, and just use it and reframe it as a, rather than a pushing it away,
yeah,
almost sort of
yeah, yeah.
embrace it, isn't it? And then think, okay, how
Mm,
can I use this to help me, and the wisdom about what's next to happen? And so actually, there's something in this, because your body is obviously telling you something, and obviously it's not a
yeah,
saber tooth tiger, but there's something going on. And so we do that. We get into that sweet spot. I love that, almost that tension of comfort and discomfort, and
Mm.
that's a difficult one. And we start to expand, obviously, because obviously you get more comfortable in the uncomfortable bit, and
Yeah,
etc.
yeah, yeah.
etc. So why does that then start to help build resilience? And I don't know, any from a psychological point of view, from your own experience.
So I think there are a number of reasons. I think that so it's being able to sit alongside discomfort and pain potentially, which is a lot of what resilience is. It's about not avoiding something. It's about that sense of, have I got the resources to feel like at some point it will be okay? And I think when you go on an adventure, whether that's a physical or a psychological adventure, you're having to rely on those resources too. So you learn to trust your internal resources. You learn to trust that you have, whether it's the experience, whether it's the intelligence, whether it's the knowledge, whatever it is that you fit, that all those factors that go into it. The more you practice feeling, getting out your comfort zone, the more you become, you learn to, you can rely on that. So I think that's really powerful. I think there's also that piece, like I said, about being able to sit with uncertainty and not knowing. So, and an example of an everyday adventure might be, I do this with my dogs all the time. I'm like, I'll go on along a route that I've always gone, or a place I've ever gone, and then I'll see a path and I'll be like, oh, I wonder what's down that path. And there'll be a bit of me going, God, you're going to be late. Don't be stupid. It's probably covered in brambles. It's not going to go anywhere. You might get off a cliff, whatever it is. There'll be a bit of me. And then there's a bit of me that goes, but what if? What might be down there? I just want to know where it goes. And then there's that bit in you that's like, doesn't know. And there's also that bit that's like, it may not be hugely uncomfortable, but it might be a little bit like, oh, what am I going to do when I get to the end of it? I have to turn back, or I don't know where this is going to lead. There may be other risks. There's an element of jeopardy involved in some sense.
Mm.
And you're having to, in deciding to then explore that path, you're having to sort of do the thing alongside the uncertainty. And you then learn that you can do stuff, and those different emotions can coexist, that you can feel excited, but you can also feel uncertain. You can also feel like this, this is not the right thing to do. You question yourself. So it's about, I think exploring all of those places, that psychological places that we prefer to avoid, actually then enables us that when we are in a difficult situation, when something challenging does hit it, it's not new to us to be in a place that we don't know. And then we can start to trust, okay, this may be on a completely different scale, and thinking of things like bereavement, or, when we have very difficult things happen in the workplace, or whatever it might be, that there's an element at which we trust ourselves. And I think that's hugely important when it comes to building our resilience as well, because it is about, actually, do I trust myself enough to be able to find a way through this, with a lot of external support as well.
It's like getting ourselves ready, isn't it, and prepared
Yeah.
for. There is uncertainty, but actually, when you get that uncertainty, actually, you're okay. As in, it may still be beyond what you've had before, but you've experienced how you've dealt with on a smaller scale before, and you know
Completely.
yourself, and developed it, and worked on strategies. And you may still have to go through some more learnings along the way, but you've almost pushed your threshold up a little bit of your
Completely. And I think there's
what
a
it takes
really,
you.
I was going to say, because that makes it sound like it's just about sort of negative resilience, or when bad things. But I think there's something really positive, because what it also means that when opportunities present themselves, and we're like, I don't know if I can do this, or, actually, I don't want to say yes to this because I might mess up, or I might get it wrong. Actually, if we practice that well, then it means we're more likely to be able to step into that opportunity, and embrace it, rather than listening to the reasons why we might not.
So how do we, rather than writing a to-do list every day,
Yeah.
because that's not helpful, I don't think. How do we incorporate this approach that we are creating these everyday moments of discomfort to try and push ourselves outside of comfort zone? How do we do that? How do you do that in a way that can be from your lessons you've learned that can translate to people who now might be sitting there on the way to a commute right now, and might be ready to go into a meeting or whatever it is? What do you do on an everyday basis?
So, I mean, obviously, it depends on how much time you've got in the day and what you've got to do. But I think first thing is the mindset shift. So the first thing is starting to see everything as an adventure, even stepping outside your front door and looking in the cracks of the pavement, which isn't necessarily about discomfort, but it is about discovering something new. Actually, what's down there? What's living in the hedge? Looking into the hedges and seeing the bumblebees. I mean, this time of year is perfect because there is so much life just going on all around us, and opening your eyes to that is a real adventure, because I think it gives such a positive boost to our senses of what else is out there other than me, and such a sense of perspective as well. So I think that those are the sort of in the moment mini adventures you can have right wherever you are, even looking out the window if you're sat in an office block and looking up at the sky and noticing things, so that you can start at that level. When you're an example of, so if you're commuting to work or whatever it is to take a different route. It can be taking a different route in tube. It might be, actually, I can walk this stop, and maybe going down a street. I mean, I'll often do it if I'm working in London, for example. I'll go and I'll walk between tube stations, and I'll just go down a different route, and sort of go down a little back alley and go, oh, there's a little house there. There's always something new to discover. And I think it's stepping into this idea that we don't know it all, that we haven't seen it all, that just because you do the same daily commute or you do the same routine or whatever it is, it's up, you have the ability to mix that up and create a mini adventure out of it, an everyday adventure out of it. And you get such a rush of sort of excitement almost. And that's where I link it to this idea of adventure, because it's that excitement and anticipation of, oh, what might I find? What might I experience? What might I see today? That parallels the excitement we get on bigger adventures. It's getting that same feeling, and I think that's super exciting, because it always offers us the possibility of change and growth. And I know and it also gives you something to do, because it's not like I sit every day and I'm spending my whole day thinking of everyday adventures, but I do know that when I've had times, and throughout the winter is often a really good example. You just have days and it feels like Groundhog Day and it's been raining endlessly or whatever. And that I can take a pause in a moment and go, oh, hold on a second, I've got something I can do about this. And that's sort of where it started from. It started from doing this in lockdown in February, stuck at home with my kids, going, actually, there's something I can do here. I can mix it up. It doesn't have to feel like this. It doesn't have to be the same. And yeah, so that's what I would do. I would just start from right where you are, look out the window, go, what's out there that I haven't noticed, and go from there.
It's almost a learning mindset, isn't it? And to explore and be curious, because when you are faced with challenges in life, because we'll all get them, is you need to be able to be curious to navigate it. You need to learn. You need to think about a different way of doing something you've never done before, whether that was 3 years ago, pandemic hit, and we all had to do things differently. That was a major shift. But there's always little things along the way in your business, in your personal life, and I think, to me, that's really valuable. And just any thoughts in terms of your advice, in terms of other ways of building resilience from your experience, in terms of how you would help people?
Yeah, so I say the main one, and the one we tend to forget about, is who have you got around you? What support have you got out there? Because we tend to think of resilience as an individual pursuit, but we're connected. We're social creatures. We were designed to live in groups. We wouldn't survive on our own, in terms of the great, that's part of who we are, how we were designed. But we tend to think that when we're struggling with something, that it's because there's something about us. And I think always I would say the first thing is to look around and go, what's the situation? Who am I? Who have I got out there in my corner? Almost do a sort of network analysis of going, have I got, for example, if I've moved house and I suddenly, don't know where to go to get my car fixed, or, I've lost the netball team that I used to play for, or whatever it is, all of those things have an impact on our resilience, as well as the sort of the deeper emotional support that we tend to think about when we talk about support. It's like, am I part of a team? Am I part of a group? Who do I reach out to? Where do I feel? How connected do I feel? And how held do I feel? And actively cultivating that I think, where it's possible, is probably the most beneficial thing we can do to our resilience, because we all need support. We all need help with it. And it's easier to find your own resources when you have either people who are reminding you of them, or people who can substitute their own when you really need it too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that community piece is often forgotten, actually. We need people around us. We need people to lean on, to input us, to support us. And it's so valuable. I think we often think we can get caught up, as you say, in the whole personal resilience and about making us really hard and get through all this. Well, actually, no, need other people, need other perspectives on, problems we may have in our lives. Actually, just somebody coming along and, have you thought about doing this way? No, I haven't
Yeah,
actually, but now
totally.
I will, and it looks differently, and suddenly you have this different perspective and support. So no, I totally agree. I've really loved talking to you, Nicki, and great insights in terms of building that resilience using sort of everyday adventures. If people want to connect with you or get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, so I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to get in touch. So you can find me on my website, resiliencework.co.uk. You can find me on LinkedIn, Nicki Bass. I'm on Instagram, Resilience at Work. I tend to document my everyday adventures there. So yeah, please do get in touch, or listen to my podcast, the Everyday Adventure podcast, as well, if you want a bit of inspiration from other people as well, because there's some amazing people on there too.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate it, Nicki.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's been lovely to chat to you.